On the basketball class, two students joined forces and successfully completed a dunk with their height advantage. It was such an obvious foul, but their classmates cheered and applauded them. Even the gym teacher gave them an approving look. However, the principal wasn't so easy to convince. She brought one of the students' mother to discuss preventing her son from participating in sports activities. It turns out that Kevin has a congenital disability, making even walking difficult for him, and the joined dunk was the only way he could play basketball. But such a move was too dangerous, especially considering Kevin's physical condition. If any accidents were to happen during a PE class, the school would not be able to bear the responsibility. However, Kevin's mother told the principal that she knows her son's situation. He has been mocked and insulted his whole life, causing him to hide away and live in a world of books and knowledge. But she knows that he also wants to play and interact with other kids like a normal child. This was finally a chance for him to play and have fun with kids his age, and she refused to take away this happiness from him. As Kevin's mother spoke, her emotions became uncontrollable, with tears in her eyes and a sense of bitterness. The principal couldn't help but be moved by her words. After persuading the principal, Kevin's mother said to Kevin,
"Oh, if you want to kill yourself in gym class, Kevin Dillon, don't expect me to cry for you."
However, the joy didn't last long. The principal informed Max that his father was being released on parole and would soon be out of prison. This news reopened the wounds in Max's heart, and he became extremely downcast. That night, he hid in the basement and cried loudly. Max's father had gone to prison for killing his mother, and Max had witnessed the whole incident. It was a nightmare that he couldn't get rid of. Max's grandfather also heard about Max's father's impending release from prison and had prepared a shotgun to give him a surprise. The next day, during lunch at school, Kevin gobbled down his food, and Max, feeling annoyed and worried, went to intervene.
"I said you're eating too fast."
But just as Max went to get his own food, suddenly Kevin choked on his food and collapsed to the ground. Max immediately rushed to Kevin's side, panicking and shouting for help. Eventually, Kevin was taken to the hospital. With a breathing tube inserted, he looked at Max, who was anxiously waiting by his side, so he joked about the doctors being like extraterrestrials from Star Trek. Kevin's optimism shone through even in the face of illness and pain, and he continued to bring joy to those around him. Kevin had become King Arthur in Max's heart, and Max hoped that he would recover soon so they could punish evil and promote good together. On the other hand, the doctor informed Kevin's mother that his condition was gradually worsening. Kevin's illness prevented his bones from growing, but his organs kept growing, especially his heart, which was under a lot of pressure. He might have only a year to live at most. Even though Kevin's mother had mentally prepared herself for her son's condition, the news of her child's imminent death was still too heavy for a mother to bear. She wanted to buy a cup of coffee, but the machine happened to be broken at that moment. The collapse of an adult occurred in that instant. She pounded on the machine and cried loudly. Max, who was unaware of Kevin's condition, could only awkwardly comfort Kevin's mother. Max hugged her and reassured her in a soft voice that Kevin would be fine, nothing would happen to him. He was just eating too fast. I promise that if he eats too fast next time, I'll dump noodles on his head directly. Kevin stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks without Kevin were the hardest Max had ever experienced. When the first snow covered the ground, Max and his mother brought Kevin back home. Kevin was told that he couldn't return to school temporarily, so Max would take him around the neighborhood after school, keeping him company. Suddenly, Kevin pointed to a peculiar building with many people in white coats going in and out. Kevin said it was a secret research facility where, after a year, they would give him a new body. He would be the first genetically modified human. Max worried and asked if it would be painful, to which Kevin replied it didn't matter as long as he had determination. He wasn't afraid of anything. That night, Max's grandfather took out the shotgun, and his grandmother asked him to put it away. However, his grandfather said that he had already lost his daughter and he couldn't lose his grandson as well. He had only served 9 years out of a 30-year prison sentence, and yet those despicable lawyers managed to parole him. The man his grandfather was referring to was Max's father. He roared that if he dared to come near his grandson, he would finish him with his own hands. When Max heard his grandfather's voice, he fell into deep fear once again. That day, he forgot to close the basement window. Max's father came and stole a random car, kidnapping Max and leaving behind Max's hat that he often wore. Max felt paralyzed with fear, sitting in the car without daring to move as the police came knocking on the door. Only then did Max's grandparents realize that Max had been taken by his father. The scene was seen by Kevin, who lived next door. He was determined to save his friend. Kevin found a photo in Max's room. He deduced that Max's father must be hiding the home of his cellmate where Kevin and Max went before. So, Kevin drove his mom's van using a crutch to push the accelerator and quickly headed towards his destination. However, since he couldn't find the brakes, he crashed into the roadside. The car couldn't be driven anymore, so he sat on the bumper and slid down. Fortunately, the terrain was suitable and he saved a lot of time. Hurrying but cautiously, he finally neared his destination. On the other side, Max's father tied him to the radiator to prevent him from escaping. At this time, the cellmate's wife came to deliver food. With a kind heart, she secretly gave Max a pair of pliers and then used the opportunity to chat with his father, delaying time. But she accidentally mentioned that Max and Kevin had once delivered a lost wallet to her. Father then realized that there was another person who knew about this place. He roared furiously, demanding to know who it was. Max was frightened by his father's yelling and the pliers slipped from his hand. Max's father realized the woman wanted to help Max escape quietly. He became furious and started beating her. This scene reminded Max of the moment his father killed his mother years ago. Max roared in despair, determined not to let the same thing happen again. Putting all his strength into it, Max broke the radiator and the two began wrestling. Meanwhile, Kevin finally arrived. Before rescuing Max, he asked a young girl to call the police. Then, by listening to the noises, he confirmed the location of the room. Just as Max was at a disadvantage, the light bulb above suddenly burst. Kevin appeared with a water gun, threatening Max's father with what he claimed was sulfuric acid. However, Max's father ignored the threat and charged directly at Kevin. At that moment, Max charged at his father like a warrior, then picked up his friend and broke through the wooden door. When his father was about to get them, the police arrived, arresting Max's father. As Max watched his father being taken away, he shouted loudly, declaring that he would never be like him. This event created a sensation in the city and they became a well-known heroic duo. 2 days later, on Christmas, the two families gathered together and had the best holiday. Before parting ways, the night sky was filled with twinkling stars. Kevin commented that the sky was a photo taken 10,000 years ago, like an old movie constantly playing in the distance. The stars they see now are the light emitted by stars that have long since extinguished. Then he gave Max a book. But when Max opened the book, there was no text inside. Kevin explained the method he used to teach Max how to read for the first time: use his imagination. Then Kevin lowered his head and wiped away a tear from his eye when Max wasn't looking. When Max turned to look at Kevin again, he had put on a smile. Then the two returned to their homes. The next morning, just as dawn broke, an ambulance parked in front of Kevin's house. Max's grandmother told him that Kevin had passed away in his sleep. Max shook his head, unable to believe it. He ran out of the house and pounded on the ambulance, demanding to have his friend back. Kevin's mother came out to comfort Max and told him that Kevin's heart was too big for his small body to contain. Kevin's mother sadly reassured Max and told him to go home and live a good life. But Max still didn't believe it. He ran barefoot in the snow, crossing the road like a madman. Even if he fell, he immediately got up. Finally, he arrived at the laboratory that Kevin mentioned. But when he got there and opened the door, all he saw were busy laundry workers. There were no scientists Kevin had mentioned, no laboratory. This place was just a laundry factory all along. Overwhelmed with sadness, Max collapsed to his knees on the floor. He couldn't accept the fact that Kevin was gone. From that moment on, Max closed himself off in the basement again. He missed the funeral and Kevin's mother moved away. And after a long time, Max returned to his original state, quietly feeling the cold of early spring alone. At this moment, the woman who lost her wallet approached him and asked what he had been doing lately. Max simply said he was doing nothing. The woman comforted Max, and her words reminded him of Kevin. Although Kevin had left him, their night's pact was still intact. Back in the classroom, Max raised his hand voluntarily, and nobody expected that this person with dyslexia would make the effort to stand up and answer a question. Despite his clumsiness and timidity, the teacher was delighted with his progress. The flight device that had moved their destiny was taken down and safely kept by Max. He then took out the storybook that Kevin had given him that day and picked up a pen to write down their night's story. It continued until early spring and they reached the end of their story. Max didn't know how to end it. He turned to the story of King Arthur and saw this passage. Some people believe that King Arthur didn't die. His tombstone sank to the bottom of the sea. On it was written, "The King of the Past and the Future." Kevin and King Arthur were equally great, and therefore Kevin will become immortal forever too. He would live in Max's heart until the day they reunited. There is no substitute for the original movie. A good film is worth watching it yourself. But you don't know where you can watch these movies? Use Superbox. With Superbox, you can access all live TV channels in 4K quality. It also provides access to over 13,000 movies and series, and updates with the newest content very often. The total cost for one of these is 2 months of your cable bill. Then you never have to pay fees or bills ever again. Click the link in my bio and use my code to get it at a better price.